By the final weeks of 1944, George S. Patton was winning battles but losing patience in Allied headquarters. The danger he faced was not German armor. It was scrutiny. Late December winds cut across northern France, rattling windows at 3rd Army headquarters. Inside, the maps showed progress. Red arrows pushing east, enemy formations bent and retreating. On paper, Patton was doing exactly what he had always done, moving faster than anyone else believed possible. But behind those maps sat another reality. Patton was under a microscope. Every order he issued, every movement of a cause, every mile, advanced or delayed, and for the first time since Sicily, his superiors were watching, not with admiration, but caution, because Patton's reputation, by late 1944, had become a double-edged weapon. He was the general who had smashed across France after the Normandy breakout, turning Operation Cobra into a rout. His Third Army had covered more ground, captured more prisoners, and destroyed more German units than Allied planners had dared predict. When fuel flowed, Patton attacked. When it didn't, he argued, improvised, or pushed anyway. But he was also the general whose mouth moved faster than his discipline. The slapping incidents in Sicily still hung over him like an unresolved charge sheet. His public remarks, careless, inflammatory, sometimes reckless-eyed, embarrassed the Allied command more than once. His habit of ignoring diplomatic sensitivities worried politicians who were already managing fragile coalitions and liberated populations. Patton was a battlefield genius, but he was also a liability, and Dwight D. Eisenhower knew it better than anyone. Eisenhower had protected Patton before, reprimanded him privately, defended him publicly, kept him out of the spotlight when necessary, then unleashed him when speed and violence were required. Eisenhower understood Patton's value and his danger. By late 1944, that balance was becoming harder to maintain. The Allied war effort was approaching a critical phase. Germany was battered but not broken. Resources were stretched thin. Political unity mattered almost as much as tactical success. Any major misstep in a public scandal, any diplomatic blowback could ripple far beyond the front lines, and Patton had a history of creating ripples, so Eisenhower adjusted, not with speeches, not with confrontations, but with paperwork, orders. 2/3 Army began arriving with language. Patton rarely tolerated restrictions, clarifications, explicit boundaries. Where once Patton had been given broad operational intent, advance rapidly, exploit success, press the enemy, he now received detailed instructions outlining where he could advance, how far, and under what conditions. Fuel allocations were tightly controlled. Axis of advance limitations were spelt out. Coordination requirements with neighboring armies were non-negotiable. It was command by constraint. Patton noticed immediately. He read every order the same way. He read maps, looking not just at what was written, but at what was missing. And what was missing was trust. The leash was shorter than it had ever been. At staff briefings, Patton said little about it. He paced. He snapped questions at operations officers. He demanded precise timelines, exact road capacities, minute-by-minute fuel consumption figures. Outwardly, he complied. Inwardly, he bristled. Because Patton did not believe wars were won by caution. He believed they were won by momentum, and momentum, once lost, was almost impossible to regain. Third Army's officers understood the tension, even if they didn't speak it aloud. They had seen Patton at his best driving units forward before the enemy understood what was happening. They had also seen him explode when restricted, convinced that hesitation was a greater sin than disobedience. Now, their commander was being asked to fight with one hand tied. The German army, meanwhile, was not behaving like a defeated force. Despite months of retreat, German units were regrouping behind rivers and forests. Intelligence reports hinted at unusual movements east of the Ardennes rail traffic at night. Armored divisions pulled from quiet sectors. Fuel reserves being concentrated rather than dispersed. Something was building. But Allied intelligence, stretched thin and shaped by months of German collapse, struggled to read the signs clearly. Many believed Germany no longer had the strength for anything more than local counterattacks. Patton did not share that confidence. He had fought Germans too long to believe they were finished simply because they were wounded. To Patton, an enemy that could still move was an enemy that could still strike. That belief made the restrictions feel even more dangerous, because while Third Army was advancing east, Eisenhower's broader strategy required balance. Montgomery's forces in the north were being carefully supplied. Bradley's command sought cohesion across a wide front. The Supreme Headquarters wanted stability. Patton wanted speed. And Eisenhower, caught between political reality and battlefield necessity, chose control. Every mile Third Army advanced now required justification. Every deviation from plan required explanation. Corps commanders were reminded, sometimes bluntly, that orders came from above Patton's level. It was subtle, but it was unmistakable. Patton was no longer operating on trust alone, and that pressure changed the atmosphere. Inside Third Army headquarters, decision-making slowed, not dramatically, but enough to be felt. Staff officers double-checked assumptions. Liaison officers spent more time on telephones than in vehicles. Requests moved up chains of command that Patton believed should have been bypassed entirely. Time was being spent. Time Patton believed the enemy was using better. Yet Patton did not openly defy Eisenhower. Not yet. He understood the stakes. He understood that another scandal or an outright refusal could end his command permanently. His enemies within the Allied hierarchy would seize the moment. His supporters would be forced into silence. So Patton waited and watched. He watched. Whether reports grow worse, he watched fuel stockpiles tighten. He watched German resistance stiffen in unexpected places. And he watched the orders remain unchanged by mid-December. The constraints on Third Army were more rigid than at any point. Since Patton had taken command, his freedom of action, once his greatest weapon, was now carefully fenced. The irony was brutal. Patton was being restrained at the exact moment his instincts told him something was wrong, that the war was about to shift, that the Germans were preparing something desperate, something violent, and if that moment came, Patton knew exactly what he would want to do. The question was whether he would be allowed to do it as winter tightened its grip on Europe, and Allied commanders reassured themselves that Germany was nearly finished. One of the most aggressive generals in the war found himself forced to slow down, bound by orders, politics, and fear of his own reputation. It was a fragile equilibrium, and it would not survive the next shock, because when the enemy finally struck, the rules governing George S. Patton would be tested under conditions no directive could fully anticipate, no cautious command could afford to misjudge. December 19, 1944. The Ardennes front is already bending under pressure. When the order arrives, it is typed, signed, and transmitted through proper channels. There is no ambiguity in the language, no room for interpretation. General George S. Patton is instructed to halt forward movement under defined conditions. If fuel drops below a set threshold, if flank coordination is incomplete, if air-ground identification cannot be guaranteed, the message is clear. Momentum must stop if control is lost. For the officers who receive it at Third Army headquarters, this is not a suggestion. It is a command decision meant to prevent catastrophe. Patton reads the order in silence. Outside, the weather is still closing in. Low clouds press down on the rolling ground of Luxembourg and eastern Belgium. Roads are slick with ice and churned mud. Vehicles idle in columns that stretch for miles. Engines burn fuel faster than planners predicted. Radio nets crackle with overlapping reports, some accurate, some delayed, some already obsolete. The offensive turn north toward Bastogne is underway, but it is fragile, and now, officially, it can be stopped. Patton's chief of staff watches his face closely. Others pretend not to. They know the stakes. A halted advance would mean time for German units to reinforce the encirclement, time for artillery to reposition, time for the weather to continue grounding Allied aircraft. Time Bastogne does not have. The order is not irrational. From a staff perspective, it makes sense. Third Army has just executed a rapid pivot 90 degrees across frozen terrain under winter conditions that punish every assumption made in warmer months. Supply lines are stretched thin. Fuel depots are behind schedule. Bridges are overloaded. Several divisions are advancing on parallel routes with incomplete lateral contact. One mistake could expose an open flank, and Patton has a reputation. He moves fast, he pushes limits, he accepts risk that others would not. Higher command knows this. That is why the order exists. To stop him before speed becomes recklessness, but Patton does not see recklessness in motion. He sees paralysis in hesitation. Maps are spread across the table. Colored pins mark divisions. the 4th Armored pushing hard on the southern axis, the 26th Infantry following slower behind, engineers struggling to keep roads open. Intelligence estimates showed German units scrambling Volksgrenadiers, remnants of panzer formations, stretched thin by their own offensive. This is the moment, Patton believes, when pressure matters more than Polish. The order says, halt, if fuel drops below the threshold. Patton asks a single question: how much fuel Dow need to reach? The next crossroads, an aide answers. It is less than the threshold allows. Technically, movement can continue. For now. The second condition concerns flank coordination. Patton requests updated reports. The answers are imperfect, but improving. Liaison officers are en route. Contact exists, even if it is thin. Again, technically, compliance is possible. The final condition is the most dangerous: air-ground identification. With weather grounding Allied aircraft, this is almost irrelevant for the moment. Patton nods. The order has not been violated yet, but everyone in the room understands what is happening. What spirit of the directive to slow the advance, to prioritize. Control over speed is already being hollowed out. Staff officers exchange looks. They are not cowards. They are professionals. They know doctrine. They also know Patton. One of them speaks carefully. He reminds Patton that higher command expects restraint, that the order was issued for a reason, that if the advance outruns supply, the entire relief effort could stall in front of Bastion's outer defenses. Patton listens. Then he responds quietly. If we stop, he says, we give them time they don't deserve. No shouting, no theatrics, just certainty. Orders go out. The advance continues. Columns move forward in staggered intervals to reduce congestion. Engineers are pushed to the front to clear obstacles. Armored units are instructed to bypass resistance when possible, leaving infantry to deal with pockets of German troops. Later, it is aggressive. It is risky. It is effective. German rearguards are surprised by the speed. Their defenses are not layered. They had expected a pause. They had expected Allied caution after the initial pivot. Instead, they find American tanks appearing on roads they believed frozen shut, but the risks begin to surface almost immediately. Fuel trucks struggle to keep pace. One breakdown delays an entire column. A bridge rated for lighter vehicles collapses under the weight of armor, forcing a detour that costs hours. Communications falter as units push beyond reliable radio range. Higher headquarters, reports begin to arrive. Third Army is still advancing. Questions are asked. Clarifications requested. Patton's responses are precise. He references the conditions. He points out compliance. He emphasizes progress. He does not limit. He does not slow down. The line between obedience and defiance narrows. On December 20th, resistance stiffens. German units, realizing the threat to their southern flank, rush reinforcements into blocking positions. Anti-tank guns are emplaced hastily. Artillery fires blind through fog, hoping to disrupt movement. American losses increase. A tank burns on a narrow road, forcing others to squeeze past under fire. Infantry advance through wooded ground where visibility drops to yards. Every mile forward costs more than the last. And still, Patton pushes. The order to halt exists like a shadow over every decision. Each fuel report, each delay, each broken vehicle inches the advance closer to the conditions that would force compliance. Staff officers calculate constantly, not just distance and supply but consequences. If Patton is forced to stop now, after pushing this far, the moral impact could be severe. Units exposed forward would have to dig in under pressure. Momentum would be lost. German commanders would breathe again. If he continues and fails, the blame will be unmistakable. This is no longer about Bastion alone. It is about command, authority. Late on December 21st, weather conditions begin to shift. Clouds thin. The first Allied aircraft appear overhead in days. Identification panels are laid out hastily. The sky, once a constraint, becomes an asset. Air support resumes in limited but decisive strikes, disrupting German movements ahead of the columns. This changes the equation. Patton now has justification to continue at full speed, but higher command has not rescinded the original directive. The order still stands. And now, Patton crosses the line. Fuel levels dip below the stated threshold. Reports are delayed. Some are optimistic. some are not. Patton chooses which to prioritize. Movement does not stop. This is the moment when the order is no longer being interpreted, it is being ignored. The decision is deliberate. Patton understands the implications. He knows that if the advance stalls catastrophically, he will be held responsible. He also knows that if Bastogne falls while he obeys the letter of the directive, history will not forgive restraint. The breakthrough comes on December 26. Elements of the 4th Armored Division punch through German lines near a newer corridor opens. It is not clean, it is not secure, but it exists. Contact is made with the 101st Airborne inside Bastogne. The encirclement is broken. The cost has been high. Vehicles are lost. Men are dead or wounded. Supply lines remain strained. The corridor will be contested for days. But Bastogne holds. Only after the fact does the full weight of the decisions settle. Reports move up the chain. Timelines are reconstructed. Fuel logs examined. Conditions reviewed against the original order. Patton has violated it, but the outcome cannot be ignored. The relief of Bastogne alters the course of the battle in the Ardennes. German momentum fractures. Allied confidence surges. The winter offensive begins to unravel. Command discipline has been bent, perhaps broken, yet the front holds. For Patton, the victory is not clean. It is effective, but costly. He has proven, once again, that speed can substitute for causing. The margin for error is accepted. For higher command, the lesson is uncomfortable. Orders matter, so do results, and sometimes, in war, the two collide. December 22, 1944. The snow has stopped falling, but the cold is tightening its grip. Across the southern shoulder of the Ardennes, Third Army does not slow down. It does not pause to reorganize. It does not wait for permission that may never come. It advances anyway. On paper, nothing has changed. Orders still reference limited objectives. Fuel allocations are still reported as adequate. Movement schedules are still framed as exploitation of enemy weakness, rather than deliberate continuation of an offensive that was supposed to halt. Language becomes the shield. Inside Third Army headquarters, staff officers stop using the word advance. They use adjustment, they use extension, they use pressure to maintain contact. Every message is technically defensible. Every report can be justified if read narrowly enough. Patton understands this instinctively. He has lived inside army bureaucracy long enough to know how wars are lost between sentences, so the columns keep moving. The 4th Armored Division leads the push, its combat commands slicing forward along icy roads that twist through forests and villages half buried in snow. Tanks advance with infantry riding holes for warmth and speed. Engineers work ahead of them, clearing obstacles under sporadic fire. German resistance is present, but it is no longer coherent. What Third Army encounters is not a prepared defense, but fragments. Rear guards thrown together in haste. Anti-tank guns positioned without proper fields of fire. Infantry units short on ammunition and exhausted from days of continuous movement. This is not how a defensive line should feel. American units sense it immediately. Enemy fire lacks coordination. Counterattacks arrive late, or not at all. Prisoners speak of confusion, of orders that contradict one another, of commanders unsure whether to hold ground or fall back. The German offensive is beginning to unravel at its edges. Third Army exploits that weakness ruthlessly. Combat Command A of the 4th Armored punches through one village after another, bypassing resistance when possible. Infantry divisions follow, widening corridors and securing flanks, just enough to keep momentum alive. Artillery displaces forward at speed, firing short missions to suppress resistance rather than prepare deliberate assaults. The doctrine is simple. Keep moving. Every mile gained reduces German options. Every crossroads taken disrupts their ability to shift forces. Every hour matters. Fuel remains the constraint. Everyone watches. Trucks arrive late. Some never arrive at all. Units siphon from disabled vehicles. Tanks idle only when absolutely necessary. Commanders make calculations at the company level, how far they can push before the engines run dry. Patton accepts the risk. From his perspective, fuel spent advancing is fuel invested in ending the crisis faster. Fuel conserved by stopping would only delay the inevitable and hand the enemy time he no longer deserves. German commanders are slow to understand what is happening. They expect the Americans to pause. Doctrine says they should. Weather, supply, and command control all argue for it. When the pause does not come, German defensive planning begins to fracture. Units retreat without orders. Others hold positions too long, believing reinforcements are coming that never arrive. Artillery fires are misaligned with actual front lines, wasting shells on ground already lost. The speed of the American advance is distorting German perception of the battlefield. By December 23rd, Third Army has already exceeded its projected daily objectives. Ground gained was supposed to be contested for days. Instead, it falls in hours. Higher headquarters begins to notice. The reports no longer match expectations. Maps are updated faster than clerks can draw them. The front line is moving north and east at a pace that does not align with the original operational plan. Questions are asked again. Is Third Army still operating within constraints? Are fuel conditions stable? Is flank security adequate? Patton's answers are calm, confident, selectively precise. Yes, resistance is lighter than anticipated. Yes, exploitation opportunities exist. Yes, halting now would be operationally unsound. He does not ask for permission. He creates a situation where stopping would look irrational. On the ground, American soldiers feel the shift. Morale rises not from comfort, but from movement. They are cold, exhausted, and short on sleep, but they are winning. The enemy is falling back. Villages are cleared with fewer casualties than expected. Momentum becomes psychological armor. German attempts to re-establish blocking positions fail repeatedly. Units arrive piecemeal. Terrain that should favor forests, ridgelines, narrow roads cannot compensate for the lack of coordination and time. Their window to stop. Third Army without consequence is closing. By the time higher command considers direct intervention, the facts on the ground are undeniable. Too much territory has been gained. Too many enemy formations disrupted. Too many American units committed forward. Ordering a halt now would strand spearheads in exposed positions and risk undoing gains, already paid for in blood. Success has outrun authority. On December 24th, as Christmas approaches, Third Army units are within striking distance of Baston's southern approaches. The encirclement is thinning. German units guarding the perimeter are no longer confident. They can hold. They can feel pressure building from the outside. Inside, Baston, the 101st Airborne, still fights, but they know something has changed. German attacks lose intensity. Artillery fire becomes less consistent. Prisoners speak of Americans coming fast from the south. Hope returns not as optimism, but as calculation. Outside the town, Third Army does not slow for the holiday. Orders move through the chain without ceremony. Push forward. Maintain contact. Break through if possible. There will be no pause for celebration. German resistance collapses faster than anticipated. Positions that intelligence expected to be held stubbornly are abandoned. Roads are left unmined. Rear guards withdraw early, fearing encirclement themselves. The German offensive, once bold and ambitious, is now reacting instead of shaping events. On December 26th, the breakthrough is achieved. A narrow thrust connects Third Army elements with the defenders of Baston. The corridor is thin, contested, and dangerous, but it exists. Supplies move in, wounded move out. The encirclement is broken. The achievement arrives before higher command can meaningfully intervene. By the time formal evaluations catch up, the decision has already reshaped the battle. Third Army has advanced anyway. It has violated intent while preserving appearances. It has gained ground faster than planners believed possible, and it has changed the operational balance of the Ardennes campaign. The order still exists on paper, but the battlefield no longer cares. December 27, 1944, the reports arrive at Supreme Headquarters in Les. First come the situation updates, marked with new front lines. Arrows pushed farther north than expected. German units listed as withdrawing or shattered. Then the logistical summaries: fuel consumption higher than authorized, movement rates exceeding approved limits. Finally, the command reviews. They tell a single, unavoidable story. General George S. Patton has violated the order. There is no ambiguity left in the paperwork. Timelines confirm it. Fuel thresholds were crossed. Movement continued. Restrictions were ignored, and Bastogne has been relieved. Dwight D. Eisenhower reads the reports without comment. As Supreme Allied Commander, he is responsible not just for victory, but for coherence, for ensuring that millions of men across multiple nations fight as one force rather than a collection of personal crusades. Patton has always tested that balance. Eisenhower knows the man. He understands his instincts, his speed, his intolerance. For Deloy also understands the danger. An army that wins by defiance invites chaos the moment defiance fails. The breach of authority is undeniable. So are the results. Bastogne is no longer encircled. The German southern flank has collapsed, faster than intelligence predicted. Third Army's momentum has forced German commanders onto the defensive, disrupting the entire structure of the Ardennes offensive. What was supposed to be a controlled relief operation has become a decisive turning point. Eisenhower faces a dilemma, with no clean resolution. If he punishes Patton now firmly visibly, he reinforces command discipline. He reminds every general that orders matter, regardless of outcome. But he also risks freezing initiative at the worst possible moment. Other commanders, watching closely, may hesitate when speed is required, fearing reprisal more than failure. Momentum. Cliff stalled. If he ignores the violation, he preserves operational tempo. The advance continues. Pressure stays on the enemy. But the precedent is dangerous. Authority weakened at the top does not strengthen itself later. Victory achieved through insubordination cannot become acceptable doctrine. Eisenhower understands that this decision will echo far beyond Bastogne. The war is not over. Germany is wounded, but still dangerous. The Western Allies are preparing for final offensives that will require coordination on an even greater scale. Discipline now will determine cohesion later. Yet Eisenhower is also a realist. He knows that stopping to settle scores while the enemy is reeling would be strategically irresponsible. The German offensive is cracking. Every hour of pressure compounds their losses. Every pause gives them time to stabilize. Eisenhower chooses restraint. There is no public reprimand, no immediate disciplinary action, no dramatic confrontation. Instead, he absorbs the violation into the outcome, privately. The message to Patton is unmistakable. The order was broken. The risk was unacceptable. This cannot become habit. Publicly, the focus remains on results. The advance continues. To outside observers, it appears that Patton has been vindicated. Bastogne is free. The German gamble has failed. American headlines celebrate speed and determination. Inside the command structure. The lesson is more complex. Eisenhower has drawn a line not in ink, but in context. Initiative will be tolerated when it produces decisive results at critical moments, but it will not be unconditionally rewarded. The authority of Supreme Headquarters remains intact, even if exercised quietly. This is leadership by containment rather than confrontation. Patton understands this. Even if he never acknowledges it openly, he knows he has pushed as far as he can. The margin he exploited will not widen again so easily. For Eisenhower, the decision reinforces his own command philosophy. Control matters. So does flexibility. The art lies in knowing when to assert one over the other. The Ardennes crisis is not yet over, but its direction is set. German forces are retreating. Allied confidence is restored. The initiative has shifted permanently. Patton's gamble has paid off. Eisenhower's restraint has preserved unity. Together, intentionally or not, they have balanced speed against control. At the moment it mattered most. In the aftermath, no formal doctrine is rewritten, no regulation amended. But every senior commander takes note. Orders are law until reality intervenes, and when it does, the burden of judgment falls not on paper, but on those willing to carry its consequences.